At 17, they were told they were on their own. What they found under the floorboards of their grandfather's abandoned workshop wasn't just a new home, it was a second chance. And if you've ever felt like the world had forgotten you, hit that subscribe button, because this is a story about finding your way back. This is for you. The sound of a deadbolt sliding shut is a period at the end of a sentence you never wanted to read. For me, that sound echoed across the manicured lawn of Mrs. Gable's suburban home, a final, metallic punctuation mark on 2 years of my life. 2 years of trying to be invisible, of trying to make my little sister, Maya, invisible. It hadn't worked. I stood on the sidewalk, the strap of my duffel bag digging into my shoulder, and watched the porch light click off. It was 8 p.m. in October. The air was cold, sharp with the promise of a frost that would settle on everything, making the world look clean and new in the morning. For us, there would be no clean slate, just the cold. Maya shivered beside me, her arms wrapped around a worn-out backpack stuffed with not much more than a couple of sweatshirts and a worn paperback. She was 15, with eyes that had seen too much and a silence that had become her armor. She didn't look at the house, she looked at me. "Leo, what do we do now?" Her voice was small, a fragile thing in the vast, indifferent quiet of the neighborhood. I wished I had an answer. I wished I was the kind of brother who had a plan, a secret stash of cash, a friend with a couch. But I was 17. In 3 weeks, I'd be 18, and the system that had owned us since our parents died would spit me out like a piece of bad fruit. Maya would be sent to a group home. That was the one thing I couldn't let happen. I'd seen those places. I'd heard the stories. They were waiting rooms for a life of hurt. "We walk," I said, forcing a confidence I didn't feel. "To the bus station. And then?" "And then we figure it out." It was a lie, and she knew it. We both knew it. We had $43 between us. That was enough for a bus ticket to somewhere, but not enough for a somewhere when we got there. Mrs. Gable had called our social worker, a perpetually tired woman named Ms. Albright, who had told her it was unacceptable to put us out on the street. Mrs. Gable had replied that my attitude problem was a risk to her family and that she'd done her part. The call ended with Ms. Albright promising to arrange a temporary placement by morning. For her, it was a logistical problem. For us, it was the end of the world. We couldn't wait until morning. Morning meant being separated, and that was the one line I wouldn't let us cross. So we walked. The streetlights cast long, distorted shadows that seemed to mock our smallness. Each step felt heavy, pulling us away from the only place we'd known for the last 2 years and into a terrifying, formless future. We didn't talk. The silence was filled with the hum of refrigerators from sleeping houses and the distant siren that was a constant soundtrack to a life lived on the edges. My mind raced, cycling through the same useless options. There were no friends to call, no family left, just the ghost of a grandfather we barely remembered, a man who had faded out of our lives years ago, lost to what the adults called his own troubles. He was a woodworker, I remembered that much. The smell of sawdust and varnish was one of my earliest memories, a warm, safe scent that felt like it belonged to another person's life. He disappeared into a nursing home somewhere upstate, and we were told he wasn't well enough for visitors. Then, a few years later, that he was gone. Another door closed. The bus station was a brightly lit island of desperation in the dark city. People slumped in hard plastic chairs, their faces illuminated by the ghostly blue light of their phones or the flickering departure board. Every person looked like they were either running from something or had nowhere left to run. We fit right in. I bought 2 tickets to the cheapest, furthest destination I could find on the board, a town called Oakhaven, a 4-hour ride north. It cost $38. We were left with 5. enough for a bottle of water and a bag of chips to share. As we sat waiting for the 11:30 p.m. bus, the fluorescent lights humming overhead, the reality of our situation began to settle in my bones. A deep, invasive chill that had nothing to do with the autumn air. I was failing. I was failing Maya. My one job was to protect her, and here we were, with $5 and a one-way ticket to a town we'd never heard of. Guilt was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. I fumbled in my pocket, my fingers closing around the only thing I had that felt like it had any substance. It was a small, tattered cardboard box, given to me a week earlier by Mr. Davies, the state-appointed lawyer who handled the remnants of my family's estate, which was to say, the remnants of our debt. He'd called me into his drab office for a meeting about my impending emancipation from the foster care system. He was a man made of beige suit, beige office, beige personality. But his eyes were kind. "Leo," he'd said, sliding the box across his desk. "This was left in your grandfather's effects. The instructions were specific. It was to be given to you on your 18th birthday. Given the circumstances..." He'd trailed off, gesturing vaguely to the file on his desk that contained the story of our lives. "I think now is appropriate. The circumstances were that Mrs. Gable had already given us her 2-week notice. My birthday was the final nail. Once I was a legal adult, she had no obligation, and the state had no leverage. She wanted us out. Inside the box, there wasn't much. A single, heavy, old-fashioned skeleton key, its shaft tarnished with age. A folded, yellowed piece of paper that turned out to be a deed. And a small, sealed envelope with my name, Leo, written on it in a shaky, unfamiliar hand. The deed was for a piece of property in Oakhaven, Lot 7, Black Creek Road. It listed the property as a workshop and a half-acre of undeveloped land. Mr. Davies had looked at me with pity. "I've had it assessed, Leo, for legal purposes. The structure is condemned, technically. The land is not desirable. It's landlocked by a new development project. The taxes are years in arrears. Frankly, it's a liability, not an asset. The debt on it is more than it's worth. A liability, not an asset. That was us, too. I hadn't opened the letter yet. I was saving it, for what, I didn't know. For a moment when things couldn't get any worse. Sitting in the bus station, with the smell of disinfectant and despair in the air, felt like that moment. The bus was still an hour away. Maya had fallen into a light, restless sleep, her head on my shoulder. Carefully, so as not to wake her, I slid my thumb under the flap of the envelope. The paper inside was thin, almost translucent with age. The same shaky handwriting filled the page. "My dear Leo, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and you are a man. I am sorry for so many things. I am sorry I wasn't there to see you grow into one. I hope you will not think too harshly of your grandfather. The world is a complicated place, and I made choices that I thought were for the best, even if they looked like abandonment. They were not. Never that. This key and this deed are all I have to leave you. I know they will tell you the property is worthless. They will tell you to let it go, to sell it for pennies to the developers who want the land. Do not listen to them. The workshop is more than a building. It's a history. It's our history. And it holds a secret. Look for the place where the floor doesn't lie flat, where the heart of the workshop beats unevenly. You'll know it when you feel it. What you find there is your inheritance. Not money for a fancy life, but a choice. A chance to build something real. Be strong for your sister. You are the head of this family now. You are the protector. I loved you more than you could ever know. Your grandfather, Arthur." I read the letter 3 times. The words blurred through the sting of tears I refused to let fall. A choice. A chance. It was more than we'd had an hour ago. It was a destination. It was a thread of hope, thin and frayed, but it was there. Abandonment that wasn't abandonment. A secret under an uneven floor. It sounded like a fairy tale, the kind of thing you read in books, not the kind of thing that happens to kids like us. But it was all we had. I looked at the name on the departure board again. Oakhaven. Suddenly, it wasn't just a random town. It was a place with a history. Our history. The bus groaned to a stop at a desolate crossroads just as the sun was beginning to bleed over the horizon, painting the gray sky in shades of bruised purple and soft orange. There was no station, just a weathered wooden sign that read, Oakhaven, population 482. The air was different here. It smelled of damp earth, pine needles, and wood smoke. It was clean and cold, and it felt like we had traveled to another world, a place forgotten by the concrete and noise of the city. Maya was awake now, her face pale in the pre-dawn light. She looked at the empty road, the dense forest pressing in on either side. "There's nothing here, Leo." "There's something," I said, holding up the old key. "Come on." Black Creek Road wasn't on the main road. We had to ask for directions at a 24-hour gas station, the only sign of life for miles. The man behind the counter was old, his face a road map of wrinkles. He looked us over, two kids with backpacks and tired eyes, and his expression softened. "Black Creek? Ain't much down that way anymore," he said, his voice a low rumble. Stanton Corporation bought up most of the parcels for their new resort development. All except the old Miller place, Arthur Miller's workshop. He squinted at me. "You kin to him?" "He was our grandfather," I said, the words feeling strange and new in my mouth. The man nodded slowly. "Arthur was a good man, a craftsman. Stubborn as a mule, though. Refused to sell. Just follow this road about 2 miles. Take the dirt track on your left when you see the fallen oak. Can't miss it. It's the only thing still standing back there." The walk was long. The rising sun cast long shadows through the trees, and the world slowly came into focus. The dirt track was more of a suggestion than a road, overgrown with weeds and littered with fallen branches. And then we saw it. Set back in a small clearing, surrounded by towering pine trees, was the workshop. It was larger than I expected, a long, barn-like structure made of weathered gray wood. The tin roof was rusted in patches, and a large window on the front was boarded up. A massive ancient oak tree stood beside it, its branches like gnarled arms reaching for the sky. The place looked asleep, abandoned, but it didn't feel threatening. It felt sad, like it was waiting for someone to come home. The lock on the heavy plank door was old and stiff, but the key slid in perfectly. It took all my strength to turn it. With a loud, groaning complaint of rusted metal, the lock gave way. I pushed the door open. The smell hit me first. It was the memory from my childhood, magnified 1,000 times. Sawdust, oil, pine resin, and something else. The smell of time itself. Dust motes danced like tiny fairies in the single beam of light that cut through a grimy window high on the wall. The inside was cavernous. Long workbenches lined the walls, covered in a thick blanket of dust. Tools hung from pegs, perfect silhouettes of saws, hammers, and chisels, each in its place. Sacks of what must have once been plaster or cement were slumped in a corner, hardened into solid shapes. In the center of the room stood a massive lathe, a ghostly shape under a canvas dropcloth. It was a time capsule, a testament to a life of hard work, a life that had simply stopped. "Wow," Maya whispered, her voice full of awe. She ran a finger through the dust on a workbench, leaving a clean streak. He really was a woodworker. We spent the next hour exploring, our footsteps echoing in the vast silence. It was cold inside, but it was a shelter. It was 4 walls and a roof. It was ours. For now. I kept thinking about my grandfather's words. Where the floor doesn't lie flat. We started in one corner and worked our way across the wide plank floorboards. I walked slowly, feeling with my feet, pressing down on each board, listening for a creak or a groan that was different from the others. The floor was mostly solid, thick-hewn timber laid over what I assumed was a concrete foundation. But then, near the back of the workshop, tucked away behind the hulking shape of the lathe, I felt it. A slight give. A subtle sponginess under my foot that wasn't present anywhere else. "Maya, come here," I called, my heart starting to beat a little faster. She came over, and I had her walk over the spot. "Feel that?" She nodded, her eyes wide. "It's different." We got down on our hands and knees. The dust was thick, smelling of earth and decay. I ran my hands over the boards, feeling for a seam, a nail, anything. The planks were tight, fitted together with a craftsman's precision. But one of them, right in the center of the soft spot, had a tiny, almost invisible notch near the edge. I pressed my fingers into the wood around it. Nothing. I tried to pry it up with my fingernails, but it was useless. "We need something thin and strong," I said, my mind racing. I scanned the tool-lined walls. My eyes landed on a set of chisels, hanging in a perfect row from smallest to largest. I grabbed the thinnest one. Carefully, I slid the edge of the chisel into the tiny gap beside the notched board. I wiggled it gently, then applied a little pressure, using it as a lever. There was a faint cracking sound of old wood and dried glue. I pushed harder. The board groaned in protest, then lifted, just a fraction of an inch. My breath caught in my throat. "I think this is it." Together, we worked our fingers into the gap I'd created. We pulled. The board was heavy, much heavier than it should have been. It came up with a final sucking sound, revealing not dirt or concrete beneath, but a dark, square cavity. And in the center of that cavity, nestled in the dark earth, was the top of a metal safe. It was old, painted black, with a single silver dial on the front. It wasn't huge, maybe 2 feet by 2 feet, but it looked incredibly heavy and profoundly immovable. It was real. My grandfather's letter wasn't the rambling of a sick old man. It was a map. A wave of adrenaline and fear washed over me. What if we couldn't open it? What if there was nothing inside? What if this was the end of the line, just another dead end? "How do we open it?" Maya asked, her voice barely a whisper. She reached out and touched the cold metal dial, then snatched her hand back as if it were hot. "The letter," I said, pulling the worn paper from my pocket again. He didn't give a combination. I reread the words, searching for a clue I might have missed. A choice. A chance to build something real. "You are the head of this family now." Nothing. It was just encouragement. Or was it? I thought back to my meeting with Mr. Davies. He'd mentioned the date I was supposed to receive the box. My 18th birthday, November 14th. It was a long shot, a wild guess born of desperation. My hand was shaking as I knelt in front of the safe. The dial was stiff from years of disuse. I spun it to the right, past 0, 3 times to clear it. Then I began the sequence. Right to 11. Left past 11 to 14. Right to... what year? The current year? The year I was born? I tried the year I was born. Nothing. I tried the current year. Nothing. The dial wouldn't budge. My heart sank. It was hopeless. "Wait," Maya said softly. She was looking at the inside of the floorboard we'd lifted. I hadn't even noticed there was something there. Scratched faintly into the wood, almost invisible, were a series of numbers. It looked like a date. August 21st, 68. "What's that date?" she asked. I had no idea. Maybe his birthday? Or his wedding anniversary? It didn't matter. It was a number. It was a chance. I cleared the dial again. My fingers felt clumsy and thick. Right to 8. Left past 8 to 21. Right to 68. I held my breath and turned the handle. For a moment, nothing happened. I put more pressure on it, my muscles straining. Then, with a deep, resonant clunk that echoed through the silent workshop, the bolts retracted. The handle turned. The safe was open. We looked at each other, our faces a mixture of disbelief and terror. What was inside? The answer to our problems, or something that would make them even worse. Slowly, together, we pulled the heavy metal door toward us. It swung open with a low groan, releasing a puff of stale, musty air that smelled like old paper and buried secrets. The inside of the safe was lined with faded, wine-colored felt. And it wasn't empty. There were 3 items, arranged neatly. The first was a thick stack of cash, bound with a simple rubber band that had gone brittle with age. The bills on the top and bottom were hundreds, and the stack was at least 2 inches thick. The second was a small, tarnished silver locket on a delicate chain. The third was a stack of thick manila envelopes, 5 of them, tied together with a piece of twine. The top envelope simply said, "For Leo and Maya." My hands trembled as I reached in and lifted out the envelopes. They were heavy, substantial. This was it. This was the inheritance he'd written about. I handed the stack of money to Maya, whose eyes were as wide as dinner plates. She just held it, staring at it as if it were an alien object. I picked up the locket and clicked it open. Inside were 2 tiny, faded photographs. On one side, a young, smiling man who I recognized from old photos as my grandfather. On the other, a beautiful woman holding 2 small children. Our parents. With us. I didn't even know a picture like this existed. A lump formed in my throat. I untied the twine around the envelopes and opened the first one. Inside were several pages, filled with the same shaky script as the first letter. My dearest grandchildren, if you have found this, it means you are standing in my workshop, and you are together. That is the most important thing. I want to tell you a story. It's the story of why I had to leave you, and it's not the one you were told. I wasn't a drunk who abandoned his family. I wasn't a failure who lost his business. I was a man who made a deal to protect the people he loved. My woodworking business was successful. I built custom furniture, and I was good at it. But I was naive. I needed capital to expand, and I took on an investor. A man who seemed respectable, but whose money came from dark places. When I realized what kind of people I was in business with, I tried to get out. They wouldn't let me. They started using my workshop, my trucks, to move things I didn't want to know about. They threatened me. And then, when your parents died in that car accident, they saw a new kind of leverage. They saw you. My blood ran cold. The car accident. It had always been just that. A tragic accident. A drunk driver. That's what they told us. They made it clear that if I didn't continue to cooperate, something might happen to you, too. An accident at the foster home. A tragic fire. They were cruel enough to do it. So I made a choice. The hardest choice of my life. I had to make myself disappear from your lives so you would be safe. I started to fail. I let the business fall apart. I sold off assets. I created a story that I was unreliable, unstable. I used every penny I had to pay them off, to buy my way out, to buy your safety. And then, I had to make sure you were truly out of my orbit. I checked myself into a state facility, feigning dementia. I became a ghost so you could live. I had to stop reading. A sob escaped my chest, a raw, ragged sound I hadn't made in years. It wasn't abandonment. It was a shield. His absence had been a fortress built to keep us safe. All these years, I'd carried a quiet resentment for the grandfather who had let us go, who had faded away without a fight. And the whole time, he had been fighting the only way he could. For us. Maya put a hand on my arm. She hadn't read the letter, but she saw the look on my face. Tears were streaming down her cheeks. "What is it, Leo?" I couldn't speak. I just handed her the pages. I watched her read, saw her expression shift from confusion to shock to a deep, gut-wrenching sorrow that mirrored my own. We didn't cry for the grandfather we had lost. We cried for the one we never knew we had. After a long time, I picked up the second envelope. This one was thicker, full of official-looking documents. The letter on top explained everything. Leo, the property is not worthless. Far from it. This workshop sits on top of the Black Creek Aquifer. It has senior water rights dating back to the original homestead deed from 1888. These rights are more valuable than the land itself, especially now. The developer, Stanton Corporation, has been buying up all the surrounding land for a luxury golf resort. But their project can't move forward without access to a massive amount of water. My water. They have been trying to get this land for a decade. They pressured me, threatened me, and when I disappeared, they thought they could just wait it out, let the property fall into foreclosure for back taxes, and buy it from the county for nothing. They don't know about you. They think the Miller line is finished. They are wrong. Inside this envelope, you will find the original deed, the geological survey I had commissioned in secret, and all the documentation proving the water rights. You will also find the name of an honest lawyer in town, a man named Elias Vance. He knew my father. He can be trusted. The money in the safe is for you to live on, to pay the back taxes, and to retain Mr. Vance. It's not a fortune, but it's a start. It's a fighting chance. Stanton will come for you. They will offer you money. It will seem like a fortune to a young man who has nothing. It will be the easy way out. You can take it, and I will not blame you. You can walk away and build a life somewhere new. Or you can stay. You can fight. You can finish what I started. You can build a home here, on this land that is soaked in our family's sweat and sacrifice. The choice, my boy, is yours. That is your true inheritance. I laid the documents out on the dusty workbench. It was all there. Maps, surveys, legal papers that crackled with age. It was a complete battle plan, assembled over years by a man who knew he would never see the victory. The sheer weight of it all was crushing. One minute, we were homeless orphans with $5 to our name. The next, we were the owners of a secret, the keepers of a legacy, and the last line of defense against a powerful corporation. I was 17. I didn't know how to pay bills, let alone fight a legal battle over aquifer rights. I looked around the dark, cold workshop. It didn't feel like a home. It felt like a tomb, a place of endings. But then I looked at Maya. She was holding the locket, her thumb tracing the image of our parents. Her face was set with a determination I had never seen before. She wasn't a scared little girl anymore. "We're not selling, are we?" she said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. The fear didn't vanish, but it was joined by something else. A flicker of anger, a spark of pride. My grandfather had sacrificed everything for us. He had trusted me to understand, to be the protector he couldn't be. Taking a buyout felt like spitting on his grave. It felt like letting the bad guys win. "No," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "We're not selling. We're staying." We spent the rest of that day in a daze, fueled by adrenaline and a shared, unspoken purpose. We counted the money. It was $20,000. To us, it was a king's ransom. It was enough. It was the fighting chance my grandfather had promised. We explored the workshop again, but this time with new eyes. We weren't just seeing a dilapidated building, we were seeing the bones of a home. We found a small back room with a cot and a wood-burning stove. We found a hand pump for water over a deep well just outside the back door. It was primitive, but it was everything we needed. That night, we swept out the back room, started a fire in the stove with old wood scraps, and ate a meager dinner of crackers and canned soup we bought from the gas station. It was the best meal of my life. For the first time since our parents died, we weren't temporary. We weren't guests in someone else's house, living by someone else's rules. We were home. The next morning, a sleek black SUV pulled up the dirt track, its polished exterior a jarring contrast to the rustic decay of our new world. A man in an expensive suit got out. He had a practiced, easy smile, but his eyes were like chips of ice. "Leo Miller?" he asked, extending a hand I didn't take. "My name is Mark Coleman. I'm with the Stanton Corporation. We heard the property had occupants. Look, I'll be direct. This land is scheduled for acquisition. The building is a teardown. We are prepared to offer you a settlement to vacate the premises immediately. $50,000. Cash. A clean break. A chance for you and your sister to start fresh somewhere else." $50,000. 2 days ago, that amount of money was unimaginable. It was a ticket to a new life, an apartment, food, security. It was the easy way out, just like my grandfather had said. I could feel the pull of it, the siren song of safety. But then I looked past him, at the workshop. I saw the dust motes dancing in the light. I could smell the sawdust and the memory of a man I never got to thank. I thought of his sacrifice, of him wasting away in a state home, pretending to be someone he wasn't, all for us. I looked Mr. Coleman in the eye. "The property isn't for sale." His smile tightened. "Son, I don't think you understand the situation. There are years of back taxes owed. This place is a legal and financial nightmare. We can make that all go away, or we can let the county take it, and you'll get nothing. This is a one-time offer." "I understand perfectly," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "And the answer is no. This is our home. You should leave now." For a second, his mask slipped. I saw a flash of pure, cold anger in his eyes. He knew. He knew we must have found something. He got back in his SUV, the door slamming shut with a final thud. As the car reversed down the track, churning up dust and gravel, I knew this was just the beginning. Maya came to stand beside me, slipping her hand into mine. "You did good, Leo." I squeezed her hand, a profound sense of calm settling over me. "Grandpa did good," I corrected her. "We're just finishing the job." Now, I know some of you watching this might be in a tough spot right now. You might be facing a choice that feels impossible, where the easy way out looks so tempting. If this story is hitting you, if you've ever felt like you were up against a wall with nowhere to turn, let me know in the comments. You're not alone in this. This community is built on people who understand that sometimes the hardest path is the only one worth taking. Let's get back to the story. The first call I made was to Elias Vance, the lawyer my grandfather had recommended. His office was on the small town square of Oakhaven, a place that seemed untouched by time. When I told his secretary my name was Leo Miller, there was a long pause on the other end of the line. I was ushered into his office almost immediately. Mr. Vance was in his 70s, with a shock of white hair and eyes that were sharp and intelligent. He listened patiently as I told him our entire story, from being kicked out by the Gables to finding the safe and the developer's visit that morning. I laid the documents my grandfather had left on his polished mahogany desk. He picked them up his hands surprisingly steady, and examined them one by one. A slow smile spread across his face. "Arthur Miller," he said, his voice full of warmth and respect. "That magnificent, stubborn old fool, he actually did it." He looked at me, and his smile faded into a more serious expression. "Leo, your grandfather was one of the finest men I've ever known. What Stanton did to him, the pressure they put on him, it was criminal. But we could never prove it. With this," he tapped the geological survey, "this changes everything. This is the smoking gun they never knew he had." He explained the legal situation in simple terms. The back taxes were significant, but the $20,000 was more than enough to clear the debt and put a retainer down for his services. The water rights were ironclad, grandfathered in long before any modern zoning laws. Stanton's entire multi-million-dollar resort project was dead in the water without them. They had gambled on acquiring the Miller property for pennies on the dollar, and they had lost. "They won't give up easy," Mr. Vance warned me. "They'll try to intimidate you. They'll file nuisance lawsuits. They'll try to bury us in paperwork. But their case is built on sand, and ours is built on rock. We will win. It will just take time." Time was something we finally had. The first thing we did was pay the taxes at the county clerk's office. The woman behind the counter looked at the deed, then at me, then at the cashier's check Mr. Vance had helped me draw up. "Well, I'll be," she muttered. "Never thought I'd see the Miller account made whole." As she stamped the papers, a feeling of immense relief washed over me. The workshop was truly ours. No one could take it from us. Life fell into a new rhythm. The workshop was our sanctuary and our project. We used the remaining money carefully. We bought a used generator for electricity, a small refrigerator, and 2 comfortable mattresses. We cleaned. For weeks, we swept away the dust of 50 years, scrubbed the grime from the windows, and organized the tools that lined the walls. With every bit of progress, the space felt less like a dusty relic and more like a home. I learned that my grandfather had been a master craftsman. His tools were of the highest quality, and I found stacks of his old notebooks filled with designs, measurements, and thoughts on the nature of wood. I started tinkering. I found a pile of scrap lumber and, following one of his simpler designs, I tried to build a small bookshelf for Maya. My first attempt was clumsy, the joints uneven. But the feel of the wood in my hands, the scent of the sawdust, it felt right. It felt like a connection to him, a conversation across time. Maya, who had been so quiet and withdrawn for years, began to blossom. She claimed the small loft space above the back room as her own, hanging fairy lights and tacking up pages from her favorite books. She started drawing again, something she hadn't done since before our parents died. She filled sketchbooks with images of the forest, the workshop, the tools on the walls. She was finding her voice again, in the quiet safety of the home we were building. The town of Oakhaven, which had at first seemed so empty, slowly revealed itself to us. The old man at the gas station, whose name was Sal, always had a kind word for us. The librarian, a woman named Mrs. Peterson, helped Maya get a library card and set her up with an online school program. The owner of the local diner started saving us leftovers at the end of the day. They were small gestures, but they were lifelines. They were the roots of a community we never knew we needed. They had respected Arthur Miller, and by extension, they were willing to give his grandchildren a chance. The fight with Stanton Corporation was exactly as Mr. Vance had predicted. It was a slow, grinding war of attrition. They sent letters, they filed motions, they even sent surveyors to the edge of our property, a clear attempt at intimidation. But with Mr. Vance handling the legal side, we were insulated from the worst of it. All we had to do was hold on. All we had to do was live. One evening, about 6 months after we'd arrived, I was working on a small table, finally getting the hang of making a clean dovetail joint. Maya was sitting nearby, sketching in her notebook. The generator hummed softly, and the wood stove cast a warm, orange glow over everything. It was peaceful. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked suddenly. "The city? School? Having friends?" I stopped sanding and thought about it. I thought about the noise, the crowds, the feeling of being constantly watched and judged in the foster care system. I thought about the Gables' sterile house, where we were never allowed to feel at home. "No," I said honestly. "I don't miss any of it. I feel more like myself here than I ever have before." I looked around the workshop, at the tools on the walls, at the half-finished table, at my sister, safe and content. This is real. Everything else was just waiting. She smiled, a genuine, happy smile that reached her eyes. Me too. A year after we arrived in Oakhaven, Stanton Corporation folded. Their investors pulled out, and their legal case collapsed. Mr. Vance called me with the news. They had offered a final, official settlement, not for the land, but for a lease on the water rights. It was a staggering amount of money, an offer that would guarantee our financial security for the rest of our lives. It would also allow the town of Oakhaven to benefit, as the contract stipulated local hiring for the new, smaller-scale resort they now planned to build. We accepted. It wasn't about the money, not really. It was about the victory. It was about honoring my grandfather's fight. The money was just a tool, a means to an end. It meant Maya could go to college wherever she wanted. It meant I could formally apprentice with a master carpenter in the next town over, to properly learn the craft that was in my blood. It meant we could restore the workshop, not just as a home, but as a functioning business, bringing the Miller name back to life. I stand here now, 2 years later, on the porch of the small house we built on the other side of the clearing, looking out at the workshop. It's no longer gray and decaying. It has a new roof, new windows, and a fresh coat of dark green paint. The lights are on inside, and I can hear the hum of the new lathe I installed. It's a place of creation again, a place of life. I'm 19 now, almost 20. Maya is 17, getting ready to graduate high school at the top of her class. She wants to be an architect. She says she wants to build places where people feel as safe as she feels here. Sometimes, at night, I take out that silver locket and the letters. I read my grandfather's words, and I feel a profound sense of gratitude. He left us something far more valuable than money or land. He left us a purpose. He taught us that home isn't a place you are given. It's a place you build, a place you fight for. He taught us that the greatest inheritances are not the things we are left, but the choices we are given. The world is still a complicated place. Scars don't just vanish. There are still nights I wake up with the ghost of that deadbolt sliding shut in my ears. But now, it's followed by a different sound, the gentle whisper of the wind through the pine trees, the steady hum of a workshop alive with possibility, and the quiet breathing of my sister, safe in the room next to mine. This journey taught me that you can't choose where you start, but you can choose where you put down your roots. You can choose to fight for your own patch of ground. And if this story has taught you anything, I hope it's that. Your past does not have to define your future. You are the head of your family now. You are the protector. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening. This channel is for stories like this, for people who have had to find their own way. If you have a story about finding home in an unexpected place, or a choice that changed your life, please share it in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you want to be a part of this community, hit that subscribe button. Because we all have a story worth telling. And we're all just trying to finish the job.